بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا كثيرا طيبا باركا فيه، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف خلق المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue reading from Imam Al-Ghazali's Mizan al-Amal, the Criterion of Action. And this is the second session. We are on page 50 of Dar al-Minhaj edition in the Arabic text. And we are still at the very beginning of Khalid Williams' translation. Jazakallah khairan. This is page 5. Lethargy in the pursuit of faith in the hereafter is also utter folly. فتور الإيمان به أيضا حماقة. I say, in addition, I say that while lethargy in faith is utter folly, it would not necessarily lead to lethargy in the pursuit of happiness, were it not for heedlessness. For when it comes to the hereafter, people are divided into 4 categories. That's Imam Al-Ghazali's division. The first are those who believe in the resurrection, paradise, and hell, just as the revelations describe them and the Quran depicts them. They believe in the resurrection. فرقة اعتقدت الحشر والنشر. Gathering and resurrection. As in the hadith about Bayt al-Maqdis being the land of gathering and resurrection, أرض المحشر والمنشر. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ala wa alam. This statement, just as the revelations describe them, كما نطقت به الشرائع. That's revelations, meaning that through and through, there should never be any discrepancy theologically between the revealed messages, revealed books. Now, of course, immediately anyone who is familiar with these messages recognizes the differences. If it's a difference in the area of law, then the Quran itself makes room for these differences. For example, the Shabbat was required of the people of the book, not of us Muslims. We have Friday, it's not the whole day, it's that time during the Friday prayer when we are not allowed to work, for example, excluding vital positions. You don't leave emergency rooms at hospitals empty, firefighters, border guards, so there are those who are, they might alternate, they might, every week, every Friday, someone else will be manning these positions. But the law, there is room. But there are certain areas in the law where there is no room. It's the same. The prohibition of sanctity of life, for example. Okay, prohibition of theft. It's all the same. They are prohibited. Prohibition of adultery. I'm talking about the law. I'm not talking about the position of such and such church or synagogue being progressive, and also Muslims. A few progressives who are accepting homosexuality, and they try to argue from within these traditions. Theologically, the belief in the oneness of God, for example, that should be absolutely no difference between the different faiths, if you will. Now, why do we have these differences? It's the work of theologians, priests, rabbis, but even sometimes even Muslim scholars. I'm using the word scholar here liberally. Especially when Muslim scholars deal with the anthropomorphic verses. Okay, so it's a post. These are post-revelational constructs, not a revelation per se. It's a long topic. So the first are those who believe in the resurrection, paradise, and hell, just as the revelations describe them, and the Quran depicts them. They affirm the physical pleasures of paradise, all of which ultimately go back to sex, taste, scent, touch, dress, and objects of vision. The word in Arabic for sex, really, here in the text, simply ilal mankuh. So the word the nakaha yankihu, nikahan. So we talk about that intimate relationship within marriage. They acknowledge that in addition to these three, or to this, there are other delights, and pleasures which cannot be described. They are those They are those which no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor human heart conceived of. مما لا عين رأت ولا أذن سمعت ولا خطر على قلب بشر. They believe that this will last forever without interruption, and that can only be attained by knowledge and action. These are the Muslims in general, and indeed the majority of those who follow the prophets among the Jews and Christians. There are differences, really. I remember hearing a Patriarch Emeritus of the Latin Patriarchate in Jerusalem, Patriarch Michel Sabah, right in front of me. So something that I have directly heard from him. He said, there is no paradise or hell. He said that paradise is simply to be with Jesus Christ and talk about the after the second coming, and hell is to be deprived of that company. And also the development within Judaism about the hereafter, about the resurrection, about hell. There are quite some differences. Okay. The second group are those among the Islamic theist philosophers. We talk about al-ilahiyin. Remember, if you have read Al-Munqidh min al-Dalal, the deliverance from error, he include the theists, the ilahiyin, along with the dahriyin, al-tabi'iyin. So the second group are those among the Islamic theist philosophers who acknowledge a type of pleasure whose modality is inconceivable to the human heart. Which they call intellectual pleasure. لذة عقلية. As for physical pleasures, They deny their external existence while affirming them by way of the imagination, such as in the case of dreams. Although dreams are spoiled by waking, while these imaginary pleasures will never be spoiled but will last forever. They claim that this will be the case for those who are absorbed with physical matters and whose souls do not look beyond them, such that they do not rise to the level of the intellectual pleasures. Yet, this should not be any reason for lethargy in pursuing them, since pleasure only occurs through what is actualized in the human soul by the influence of what is touched, seen, tasted, and so on. The external thing is what causes this influence, and pleasure itself is not an external thing, but rather the influence that occurs when the external thing is present. If this influence can occur in the soul without the presence of the external thing, as happens in dreams, this must mean the external thing is not actually required. The third group are those who deny physical pleasure altogether, whether real or imaginary. They argue that imagination requires certain corporeal instruments, and that death severs the connection between the soul and the body, which is its instrument of imagination and all other sensations. The soul, so they say, never again comes under the body's control after its parts, if after it parts with it, and so the only pains and pleasures it can experience are non-physical ones, which in fact are greater than the physical ones. Even in this world, man's desire for intellectual pleasures and his fear of intellectual pains are greater. Thus, they dislike the pursuit of physically strenuous activity and prefer circumspection to exposure and to discharge sexual desire in private and to endure pain and hardship. One of them might even go for a day or two without food in order to better enjoy a victory in a game of chess, since food is physical while the pleasure of victory is intellectual. He might charge into battle against a more numerous foe in order to be slain, compensated by the pleasure he feels in knowing that he will be praised and lauded for his bravery. And in the hadith, such a person who simply looks for fame to be so that people will say that he was a brave person, he will be exposed on the day of judgment. The same thing about those who spend, they give charity so that people say that they are generous. So anything that is done for egoistic reasons, uh, of course, it's all about the intention. They'll be exposed on the day of judgment. They claim that physical pleasures are greatly lacking when compared to the pleasures that await in the hereafter, as distant from them as the fragrance of delicious food, as the fragrance of delicious food is from the taste of it, or as the sight of one's beloved is from lying down with them, or even more distant still. A little, a little bit more details in Arabic, though the essence is translated and it is correct. Uh, the sight of one's beloved. ونسبة النظر في وجه المعشوق, literally looking at the face of the beloved, and not only beloved here. There's معشوق, there's certain uh, obsession. Yet because the masses cannot understand this, so they claim the pleasures of the hereafter are described to them in terms of physical pleasures that they recognize. Consider how a child is given an education so that later in life he might obtain a position in the judiciary or in the government or the government. The child has no conception of the pleasures of those things. So instead, he is promised other rewards that he does enjoy, such as games to play or a pet bird to amuse him. What's the pleasure of a pet bird next to the pleasure of kingship and governance? Yet, since he cannot understand such lofty concepts, he is enticed with those other things, so that little by little he can be guided towards that wherein his happiness lies. Now, if all of this is true, there's some difference about the صولجان in Arabic, which is not translated, such as games to play, which is true really. The صولجان, the way I understand that game is almost like having a curved uh, staff, a curved stick, uh, removing an object from one place to the other one. Just imagine what happens in hockey, but it's, of course, there is no. This is not played in on snow or an ice rink. This is the more of temperate weather and probably played on arid land somehow. So that kind of game with the Saulijan. Now, if all of this is true, it should not be any cause of for lethargy in pursuing the hereafter, but rather ought to encourage it all the more. This is the position of the Sufis and the theists among the philosophers, to the last of them. The Sufi masters have been so bold as to say it outright that it is blameworthy to worship Allah in pursuit of paradise or escape from hell, and that those who seek Allah have a loftier goal in mind than that. Anyone who observes such masters, looks into their beliefs, and reads their writings will see that this is what they believe and that this belief informs all of their states. Uh, so the position of the It is blameworthy to worship Allah in pursuit of paradise or escape from hell. Yes. It is blameworthy, of course. فهو لئيم in Arabic. Such a person is mean. There's a statement attributed to Rabi al-Adawiyya, rahimahullah. Now, whether she said that or not, but that's what I have read. She said that she neither worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because she's interested in paradise, nor for fear of hellfire. She worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because that's what is right. In fact, لأنه حق. For he is because worshipping is the right thing to do. Yes, the right relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anyone who observes such masters, looks into their beliefs and reads their writings, will see that this is what they believe, and that this belief informs of their states. The fourth group are the masses of fools whose names are unknown and who are not considered to be thinkers at all. ولا يعدون في زمرة النظار. Almost like they cannot be amongst the theoreticians. They believe that death is absolute nothingness, عدم محض, and that neither piety nor impiety have any consequences at all. And that after death, man returns to nothingness, just as it was before he existed. It is scarcely correct to call such people a group at all, since group denotes a collective, while this is not the school of thought of any collective, nor attributed to any non-thinker. Rather, it is the belief of the foolhardy sower of falsehood, so dominated by his appetite and overwhelmed by his demon that he is unable to resist his own caprice. His self-indulgence does not allow him to admit that he is powerless to resist his caprice, so he excuses his own deficiency by claiming that it is simply inevitable, and indeed that it is right. Then he desires to be helped by others, so he calls them to his falsehood. The soul's own innate desire to follow its caprice is the primary thing that drives other fools to believe him, especially when some wicked people attempt to ascribe this belief to figures known for their wisdom, such as Aristotle and Plato. Or to groups such as the philosophers. He draws the listeners on by saying, "Your knowledge is not any greater than theirs." And they struggled for ages and found nothing. This poor fellow does not realize that he is being deceived, and so believes him because that accords better with his nature. He does not ask him for any proof. When he attributes the school of thought to those figures, though if he told him a tale involving the loss of a dirham, he would not believe him without proof. He said to him, "Your father had promised those 10 dirhams he left you to someone else, and he has a document signed by witnesses." He would say, "Where is the proof?" Is there a living witness to attest to this? What about the document? Where are these signatures? Yet he readily believes him about the school of thought he ascribes to such figures without two witnesses to attest they heard it from him. This really reminds me of the atheist scientists who abandon science and the scientific scientific methodology the moment they start speaking about the universe in a way that is absolutely with no, not only there's no proof, I mean, simply conjecture. Simply, there was an interview with Richard Dawkins, and he was asked about the possibility of life in the universe, and talking about the possibility that there's an Earth, like a planet similar to Earth, and that there are people who are similar to us, and like and he went on to describe their being, their physiognomy, their life, their, like as if he was describing people on Earth without a shred of proof, without any. I mean, there's absolutely nothing scientific, zero science, and he's the I would say the prophet of denial, of the prophet of atheism. So after asking the questions, where are these signatures? Yet he readily believes him about the school of thought he ascribes to such figures, without two witnesses to attest they heard it from him, and without needing to see it in his own writing or examining his written works, even in the hand of another. And even if he were to hear it from those figures unambiguously, with his own ears, he ought to be hesitant to accept it and to claim that there is no proof for it. If he arrived at this position through blind conformity, taqlidan, then conformity to the prophets, saints, scholars, indeed even conformity to the masses, would be better than conformity to an individual who is not infallible. This is people who simply follow sometimes Western intellectuals who practically they don't have really much to offer. Postmodernist schools, postmodern philosophers, deconstructionist, without really. I met a French, okay, I'm going to say Muslim intellectual, because he came from Islamic background, Algerian, originally Algerian, French. He considers himself French. If you say to him, you are simply following, those who existed before you, the French, or even his contemporaries amongst France, deconstructionists, he would be offended, because he thought that he was original in his deconstruction. And I asked him only one question: if you deconstruct everything, where do you stand ultimately? there has to be somewhere where you would ultimately stand. Uh, so if you are going to be, to blindly follow an individual like this, uh, then why not follow those scholars? And it reminds me the idea of following the masses. And it's better than someone who is not infallible. Uh, Remember the position of Imam Malik, rahimahullah. He did not follow blindly, by the way, but we talk about his methodology. It did include the uh, the the work, the action, the norms of Ahlul Medina, the people of the city of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You talk about the second generation. It's impossible for them to agree upon something that is not part of the Sunnah. So it's really in a very intelligent way. He established that the position of the masses in that particular context is valid. Inshallah, this is enough for this session, and we'll continue tomorrow بإذن الله عز وجل. Until then, سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.